The annual session of the National People's Congress is now taking place in Beijing. China, as the second largest economy in the world and the largest developing country, not only needs to focus on its own structural reform, but take part in crucial debates about WTO reform, or the reform of the World Trade Organization. That is argued by Zhou Hanmin, a member of the Standing Committee of China's advisory body. He told me that there are principles China should stick up to in the debate. And Zhou researched for policymakers about the WTO before China made the final decision to join the trade body. What role should China play in the reform of WTO? What exactly will be in China's proposal? Take a look. Mr. Zhou, welcome to CGTN. You've been advising through the platform of CPPCC about role that China should play in the reform of WTO. Exactly what you meant.
As a matter of fact, just after reading two proposals by those major players of WTO, I mean the United States, Japan, and EU, late last year and early this year, I think on the agenda of WTO, a very major issue is WTO reform. China is a key player in trade and economic development in the world because China is #1 for its trading amount. So that's why we need to have our proposal. Of course, our proposal is not going exactly in the opposite way of their proposal, but to see what kinds of momentum, what kinds of consensus we can reach.
When you say China should have its own version of proposals, what should be some of the most important elements in this proposal?
We need to go back to the history. We need to trace back to the history of the formation of WTO and its predecessor, GATT, G-A-T-T. G-A-T-T was formed on the very first day of 1948, after the Second World War. What we are going to trace back is just try to stick to those principles. Those principles have successfully experienced the ups and downs of the international economic development.
What are those principles you're
For
talking
instance,
about?
most favored nation principle. That's very much important. National treatment is, of course. Non-discrimination is the third. And then last but not least, differentiated treatments towards developed and developing nations or members. Those rules and laws we need to follow.
But as you may know, Mr. Zhou, there is a debate about exactly what kind of country is China. Is it a developing country? China claims itself to be the biggest developing country in the world. However, China has already become the second largest economy in the world, and therefore, how to categorize China, especially, for example, in the upcoming WTO reform, will be a hot debate issue, isn't it?
Of course, it is. However, there is a very important standard to clarify which country in which category. That is GDP per capita. If you say the overall amount of China is, of course, China is the second largest one so far as the overall amount is concerned. If you judge GDP per capita, it's almost maybe number 70 along the list of all those 193 members. So China is still in the stage as a developing nation. However, in certain areas, especially along the coastal areas, some cities and provinces could be in the category of so-called developed regions. However, judging a sovereign state, you need to take the overall picture. Overall picture is China is still in that category. This is my view.
Just a few days ago, the United States have put forward a document to the WTO suggesting its trade policy is not going to be dictated by Geneva, but rather decided in Washington. In other words, it's suggesting to the WTO that this is a make it or break it deal with the United States during the reform of the WTO. So, Mr. Zhou, when you have the largest economies acting like that, the fate of WTO is very unpredictable. Therefore, what should be China's role?
Actually, in your question, three elements could be clarified in a very, I will say, orderly way. First, can a country or member of WTO be a kind of superpower out of the platform of principles? The answer is no. Second, who is the founder or who is among the founders of the principles themselves, and that founder should be abiding by the rules and laws of the WTO. United States is, of course, the first one to be mentioned. And thirdly, of course, today we have noticed, we have sensed, and we have experienced a new trend. Unilateralism just tried to go against the multilateralism. This is something very much dangerous. I will say people should go back to the principles themselves, even though the principles are not 100% right in face of the new change of the world economy. However, change is one thing. Try to abolish it is the other way.
Right.
Frankly speaking, who is the first and foremost beneficiary of the rule itself? The United States is, of course.
Some of the most developed economies in the world, they do not see that they've been benefiting from the international institution over the past 10 years, let's just put it that way. They think the others, for example, China and some of the other emerging economies, are the biggest winners rather than theirs, and therefore they might make a choice that to walk away. That's a phrase that President Trump has been using quite frequently recently. Can the rest of the WTO be able to risk the possibility that the U.S., the largest economy, walk away?
People not outside of the U.S., I would say those rational people in the Congress, in the cabinet themselves, they do think a country, a strong country, used to play a key role for the security and peaceful development of the world. Now they try to abolish, to jeopardize the rules themselves. This is a very dangerous trend. So today, we need to have not a coalition. We need to have a common sense. We need to have a consensus. First and foremost, common sense plays a mirror to indicate the future. What is a mirror? Right after the ending of the Second World War, WTO rules and laws are one of those common senses. We need to follow. Never mean we are not going to change even a little bit. Even we can change dramatically or put it upside down sometimes. However, you need to use the due process. Due process sometimes precedes the rights. This is an Anglo-American legal doctrine or legal principle. Procedural is so important.
Mr. Zhou, in that spirit, you've seen recently there is ruling coming from the WTO about the dispute between China and the United States, whether China has been putting too much subsidies towards some of the agricultural products. And the ruling by the WTO now is in favor of the United States. So when you're talking about rules, which means there could be possibilities that China may not necessarily going to benefit from every ruling of the WTO, even on some of the very critical issues. Is China ready for that?
China has been ready for that. Not is China going to be ready for that. For instance, right after China joined the WTO on the very moment of December the 11th, 2001, up to today, several dozens of cases have been brought up involving China. And large percentage of those, the rulings were against China. China still tried to abide by because it's rules. So for us, it is to see reform never ends.
Right.
We take reform and open the policy as the second revolution of China. We are still in the middle way. Towards the future, we need to not to tolerate, but to sense and experience those rulings against us. And then, frankly speaking to me, it's a kind of force to push us, have the internal reform to meet the new needs and wants of the society.
Right. China has filed complaints inside the WTO about the tariff raise against the Chinese products as a result of the ongoing, what some say, trade war. However, there's no result yet coming from the WTO ruling, so which means on even critical issues, China, together with the others, have to be very patient waiting for a ruling from the WTO, which already could be much later than what the realities would expect. So is China ready for that as well?
You are mentioning a very critical point. Why it's so slow, not so effective, why we need to have WTO reform. DSP is a very, I would say, important example for us to follow. Dispute settlement body. They have two layers. But now, just because the principle to reach agreement in WTO is what we call mutual consensus, meaning even one member is trying very hard to do something against the ruling, then nothing could happen. The appellate body of DSP now only have 3 judges. They have no time to take all the complaints. And now you could see, by the end of this year, 1 or 2 will retire again. That means DSP itself is almost nothing, just with a framework there.
Paralyzed.
Who to be, you're right, paralyzed. Who to be blamed? The answer is very simple, the United States. Why? They say quite a lot of rulings are against the U.S. They are not satisfied with the ruling themselves.
Are we going to expect to see these kind of things repeat itself over and over again? That one of the largest economies that's never going to come back to the principles and the others just have to suck it?
We cannot say the U.S. are not going to be back to the principles themselves. However, the major trend is there. So that's why they have their proposals and we have ours. I will say our proposal, China's proposal for the reform WTO, is not totally against the wishes and expectations of the United States. But however, they are not today trying to go into the same river at the same time.
Right. Well, Mr. Zhou,
Yes.
you were instrumental in doing research
Yes.
about the WTO
Yeah.
and
Very
also
big
provide the advice to the policymakers at the time when China was weighing the pros and cons of joining the World Trade Organization. And now China is at another critical stage, which is to play its appropriate role in the reform
Yes.
of the World Trade Organization.
Yes.
What can we draw the inspirations from the past history?
I, together with some professors, worked on that ever since China applied for the resumption of her membership in gov't as early as 1986. What we do, or what we did, the only thing is we tried to have a thorough analysis of the rules and laws and doctrines, together with cases of gov't and later WTO, to see what we can take. Meaning, we need to have reforms ourselves. We need to take the big changes ourselves as something as a must. So the encouragement today is we need to take lots of new trends in terms of practices and in terms of laws and rules later as something we need to do.
So how is that, for example, the US-China trade negotiation,
Yes.
which is bilateral, but in a way be able to help China to streamline its own plan for further reform and opening up, and also have an impact about China's role within the reform process of WTO? That's an interesting question, isn't it, Mr. Zhou?
It's a very interesting question because starting from May 2018 up to today, almost 9 months already, 7 rounds of negotiations have been finished, have been gone. What we can take from that, what the world is expecting. The world is expecting not only the good result of the negotiation between two countries, but try to see what kinds of new rules and doctrines, even the shape of the rules and doctrines could be worked out. So this is a due responsibilities. One, on one side, is for two countries.
Right.
On the other side, it could have very strong impact for the future WTO reform. So we do have a sincere expectation that the negotiation could be very well finished. Not to see who is loser, who is winner.
Right.
So far as negotiation is concerned, both are winners. I will say three things we need to remember first. So long the result is benefiting Chinese people to realize much better future in terms of our life and work, then we follow it. Second, so long this is a kind of reform we need to take in very different aspects, then we need to take it. And the third, so long this kind of negotiating could set up a very good example to solve disputes between the number one and number two in the world. Because you may have read a book by Professor Allison. His name is very, I will say, shocking. Meaning, can we escape? Can we avoid a war between the United States and China? Let's see. If this negotiation is successful, it will set up a very good example to see this is the way we need to solve between two not superpowers, number one and number two countries, then can set up another example for people to follow.
Now, this year, when the two sessions are going on,
yes,
it's very clear China is facing quite some challenges. But at the same time, China is determined to overcome these challenges in order to get to the next stage.
Yes.
To you, what is the most important thing for now?
China is facing challenges all the time, but this year could be very critical, meaning bilaterally we are negotiating with the United States, not only for tariff issue, but for very comprehensive issues covered by the agreement. Second, China is facing WTO reform later on.
Right.
So what we need to do, we need to take the courage from the past experience. The courage is, so long this is something in long term will benefit this nation and the people of this nation, we need to take it.
All right.
So sometimes, so-called prices we pay, that's in short term. In long term, if this nation could be so well respected by the world, then this is a victory.